You also work on a creator-owned series for IDW, Ragnarok, which is, you're taking the traditional Thor from Norse mythology, not from the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby mythology.
No, that would be wrong. That would be wrong. I'm not doing that.
So talk about that book and how much you enjoy doing it.
If you show this, that is my version of Thor. He has no lower jaw. How he talks, how he eats, it's a comic book. I don't have to explain that. Somebody asked him how he ate food, and he says, well, it is a trick. And that's all he says about it, so I'm done. But I decided, I have a friend, Scott Doomberry, who's an editor at IDW, used to be in DC and then Wildstorm before that. And Scott asked me about 17 years ago, 18 years ago, if I would maybe want to do my own version of the Norse myths, come back to that. And I'm a Norse myth fan from long before I discovered the Marvel Comics. My grandparents were from Norway on my father's side. I don't claim any genetic connection, but I loved that stuff, and I loved it early. So I thought about it, and the thing is, you can read about the Norse myths in a million books that are out there, and I wanted some different idea. And eventually I had the idea, Ragnarok in the Norse myths is the end of all things. It's the doom of the powers, the twilight of the gods. The gods and their enemies meet on this great battle plane that's 100 leagues in every direction, and they all fight, and they all kill each other. And they each kind of one for one. Loki and Heimdall kill each other. Thor kills the Midgard serpent. He drowns in its blood as it flows out from him, and the others all die as well. And so I took that idea and I changed the poetry, the idea a little bit, so that Ragnarok has happened, this great battle has happened, but Thor wasn't there. And because he's not there, the Midgard serpent, who can encircle the world, was not killed. And because he wasn't killed, the bad guys won. So Ragnarok is over. Thor wasn't around, the gods are all dead. The 9 worlds of Norse mythology all collapse into one giant land because with the gods gone, everything's out of whack. The sun and the moon are eaten by giant wolves as they were in the myths, but there's nothing about what happens after that. In my story, the wolves, eat the sun and the moon, you're going to die. They die, they fall to this ground. They are now giant carcasses. I haven't drawn them yet. They're giant carcasses somewhere with the sun and the moon inside them, radiating light out through these rotting carcasses. So it's the same light across everything. It's called the dusk lands, because it's always kind of a dusk light. It's never dawn, it's never day, it's never night. And 300 or 400 years after this happens and the bad guys are ruling the dusk lands, Thor comes back. And we find that he's been imprisoned, but by who or how we don't know yet. But he gets out, he doesn't know what's happened, and he finds out gradually, fairly rapidly. He can tell that the light isn't changing. So the sun and the moon are gone, he can tell it instantly. And he just goes back to the ruins of Asgard. He finds what's left of his wife and children. She had beautiful hair made of gold, so gold's imperishable, so he could tell which one of the mummified bodies on the ground was hers. He finds the children, and he learns gradually that everyone he knew is dead, the worlds he knew were dead, are dead, and he's not entirely happy about this. And he still has his hammer, which is represented right there based on some of the Norse amulets that were available that they've discovered from the Viking times. And so he picks up his hammer after he burns his wife and children on an eternal pyre. He brings down lightning, eternal lightning to keep it lit, a John F. Kennedy reference of some sort, and then goes out into the 9 worlds to find the great enemies and discuss with them the matter of all things and how life is in the Dusklands. And that's where I'm at right now. I've done the story, a 6-issue storyline, which introduces Thor, introduces the world. I've done another 6 issues in which he discovers Hel really was her name in the myths. Hel, the goddess of the dead, isn't really around. It's not clear what happened to her. Hel itself, Helheim, is this vast pit in the earth where the dead climb out of and come out into the world, the Draugr of the Norse myths, the Norse stories. And so there's a guy on a castle on the edge of it called Angantyr. He refers to himself as the Lord of the Dead. And he figures out that Thor is still alive and sends assassins after him. And so the second arc is the story of those assassins and Thor and Angantyr and what happens there. The third arc I'm just starting to work on will be called The Breaking of Helheim, in which Thor goes into Helheim and finds out what's happened to Hela and has adventures there. So that's the story I'm telling now. Book's called Ragnarok because as long as Thor is alive, Ragnarok is not entirely over. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks for filling us in. That was great. Great pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.